to remind everybody that in the back there's 2 sign-up sheets. There's one for if you are here for extra credit. Go ahead and put your name and your professor's name, and we'll make sure that they know that you are here today. And also there's another sign-up sheet for if you want to know any more about Psych Club. Next semester we'll be starting afresh, and if you want to join us and make flyers or just do office hours or anything like that, we'd be glad to have you. So if you want to just put your name and email on that sheet, that would be awesome. Today we're going to hear from Dr. Todd Manson. He's one of our professors here at IUS, and he's going to talk to us about his exciting field of industrial organizational psychology. Please let me welcome. We also have 2 former IUS graduates coming to talk to us about graduate school.
Actually, jobs.
Oh, yeah, jobs. Sorry. One of our former presidents actually is working as at the Department of Child Services, and that is Wednesday. Oh, it's tomorrow. At 12:20 over there in room 122. And then there's also on April the 22nd, there is a couple of people from Spalding coming in to talk to us about the differences between the PsyD, the PhD, and the EDD. So all that alphabet soup is exciting. So if you guys want to come to that, that would be amazing.
Okay. So this, thank you, Elizabeth. So this talk next week, the one tomorrow is a couple of our recent graduates, including Jessica Bryant, who's president of our Psych Club last year, right? It's not this year, last year. So 2012-13. And then next week, for those of you interested in clinical counseling, those kind of areas, this is Dr. Day and a couple of his graduate student interns. So Dr. Day runs our counseling center. So next week's event on Tuesday would be a good one. These flyers will go up in the stairways very soon. All right, so Ashley asked me to talk a little bit about my area. So about half of you have been in my classes, so you know my area. I'll try to embarrass you as we go through this occasionally. And so my area is one of the next to clinical and counseling psychology. Some people would say the second most popular applied psych area. Some people talk about school and educational, but it is a very popular, growing field. Graduate programs are coming up all over the place. And so it's called industrial and organizational psychology. So for me, I'm going to tell you a little about what we do. We'll get some experiences from you as best we can, and whatever you want to talk about, we can take it in that direction. I'll tell you what I do in my 2 classes, and I'll tell you some of the things that some students of mine are doing out in the field and in graduate school in the near future. And then tell you a little bit about where people with these degrees work, how do you become one of these people if you want to become one of these people, and how it applies to your life. So one of the things I try to sell my students on is that even though, regardless of whether you decide ever to work in this area, which will be a relatively small percentage of our students here, but growing percentage, it seems like, since I've been here. This is my 6th year, so we get more and more people coming into this, which is good. Or doing similar stuff in the business school, which I'll talk about as well. Regardless of whether you do that, if you plan to have a job, how many of us plan to have a job in the future? Yes. You have a job, Dr. Lipinski back there, and you plan to continue to have a job. You will be, most of you, at some point in your life, you will be working with others, you will have supervisors. What we talk about here will either be your experience or you will be managing other people and doing things that we talk about in my 2 classes. And so it will benefit you greatly being in either or both of these classes, regardless of whether you work in the area. So it'll all be stuff that's related to you. So a little bit about the field here, and then we'll see what we have here. You guys know, you've taken psychology, so what's a generic definition of psychology? A scientific study of behavior, mental processes, typically human behavior, mental processes. Of course, some do work with animals and come from there, as you know. And that spans a wide range of things, all the way from those of you who are neuro class, which I see at least 1 or 2 of you, back about there, and studying the brain, to me studying work behavior. So it's a wide range. So what we're doing here, of course, is we're applying psychological principles and methods, scientific methods, in studying work behavior. And that spans anything at work we'll go through. Also addressing human resource problems in organizations. What do you think are some human resource problems? Maybe somebody who hasn't been in one of my classes. What might be a human resource problem that organizations have to deal with? Yes? Could be. They have to, how do those employees get to the company? They just wander in one day? How do employees get to a company? Yeah, you have to be hired, right? So you have to maybe be recruited, you have to be hired, and then you have to be trained, and you have to have your performance appraised. You might be hopefully not fired, but some people might be. You might be promoted. You might deal with things like conflict, low motivation, low job satisfaction, counterproductive behavior of all different types. And so these are things that organizations have to deal with of any type of organization that has employees has to deal with human resource issues. So that's what we study, right? A couple of things. We have some people in business school here are double majors. Are you a double major or are you just minor in business? Okay. But involved in the SHRM organization, right? And so we have some similar topics and titles that go from business schools to psychology. And there's a lot of overlap in this area. So just some other titles: work psychology, occupational is a little more of a European title. I think personnel management is a business school. Title HR management. We have a degree in HR management here in the business school. So very similar. Organizational behavior is a business school term which is going to be used almost synonymously with organizational psychology. These two might be similar to industrial psychology if we break industrial and organizational up into two. So just some names that you might run across here. Depending on time, I'll pull this up and show it to you. If you take one of my classes, you become very familiar with this website. This is the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology. One of the subfields or sub-organizations from the American Psychological Association. And so you get on this site, you get about anything you want. So they tell you all about the field. They tell you all about jobs. You can search out job opportunities. You can search out graduate programs, any graduate program in the U.S. and Canada. Is that all? Is there any other on there that you noticed? I think U.S. and Canada that has anything related to this field is right there, free of charge. And so you can get all that very easily on that field. So what do we do in this area? I want to go through and just sort of highlight some things that we do in my classes that are some issues that people who work in the field have to deal with that I think you might be interested in hearing about. But if there's something you want to talk more about, we can go into that along the way. So what I do, I'm not terribly creative, so I teach two courses here. And the field is industrial and organizational psychology. So what do you think my two courses are titled? Industrial and organizational. So the actual title is a little different. I had to use what was available when I got here. The org course I teach in the summer, and I think called Concepts and Applications of Organizational Psychology. I don't know who came up with that one, but I would just call it organizational psychology. We'll move it a little bit easier. But so basically, the field we can divide it into two areas. So my two courses, even though I do another topic, motivation down here, I'll talk about a little bit. These are the topics that fall into organizational psychology. So one of the things that we do, first of all, this is a little bit more business focused here, more of the HR kinds of things in this course. The other one's a little bit more social psych focused, but they're essentially the same field. And so here in personnel psychology or industrial, one of the things we do is called job analysis. So one of the things that we do, and it seems obvious, but it isn't if you're out there, is that before we can decide how to hire people or train people or appraise their performance or study their behavior, we need to know what the job is, right? So we go in and we study the job, we analyze the job. And so we might, the students in my class go out and they do this as a project in the industrial class in the fall, typically. Every fall I've been teaching. And so we get in a job. We might go in, study, read about a job, go in and interview some people. You taking the selection class over in business? You did, Brenda, right? You took selection. So you did a project there as well, right? And so you go and you study a job, you interview some people, employees, you observe them. You might survey them. And trying to learn what is it that they do in this job? What's the most important aspect of the job? What do they spend their time on? And those might be obvious, they may not be so obvious. And for example, in graduate school, I got to do a couple really cool job analysis projects. And one of them was I studied, this is actually from a master's thesis, I got to study the firefighters in Clearwater, Florida. Anybody ever been to Clearwater, Florida?
I think my cousin just got a job as a firefighter in Clearwater.
There are worse places to be in the wintertime than Clearwater, Florida, trust me. Very nice. And actually, I was studying the fire lieutenants who were the supervisors of the firefighting crews, but it's sort of the same thing. And so what did I do? I went and hung out with them. I'm going to say, well, I don't think it was all guys, a couple of women there, I think, but mostly males. And I hung out with them. I went on ride-alongs with them. I interviewed them. I talked to them. I watched what they do. And but as I tell my classes, I regret to this day I did not slide down the poles. I still regret that. I didn't want to slide. I don't even know if it was operational, but I wish I had done that. And so we studied what they do, and I surveyed them, got a lot of information about them. And so a lot of times things aren't so obvious. So what do you think would be the most important part of a firefighter job? That would be a characteristic. What about the job itself? What's the most important thing they do?
Oh, saving lives.
Saving lives. So fighting fires, pulling people out of the fire, whatever. How much time do you think they spend doing that?
Very.
In Clearwater, Florida.
Yeah.
Very little, if any. Rare. And so they're doing other things. They're spending most of their time doing things like training, cleaning, making dinner. On their 12, 24-hour shifts they would work. And so, yeah, sleeping, or trying to sleep. But of course, you know, they go from being hanging out, not doing much, to maybe 5 minutes later somebody's dying right in front of them, or they're trying to save somebody. So it's a very unique job, very different. So really to get in, before we have to decide what kind of characteristics people need to do a job, we need to get in and study it. So we spend some time, that's one of the things that we do a lot in this area. And so we do that to get information to do all these other things, selection, training, and performance management. These are the core things that people do. Most industrial psychologists who work out in companies spend most of their time working in personnel selection. So companies are very interested in figuring out how to hire people, how to hire the right people, how to hire people who are going to be good employees. And how do you do that, right? And so what you do is you do all these things that you've probably experienced, right? How many of you have been in a job interview? So most of you? What kinds of questions they ask you? Anybody? What kind of questions they ask you?
When I faced the chief's board for the Louisville Metro Police Department, they asked me at what point in my life was I the most scared, or basically, like, that was probably bad English, but that's basically what they asked me.
Sure.
They asked me some other questions too.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Tell me about yourself. What's your greatest weakness?
That's probably a very typical one. So we have some ways that it shouldn't surprise you, or maybe it does, is that a lot of people out there doing this don't do it the way that we think it should be done. They do it the easy way. And so the easy way is tell me about yourself. Hannah, tell me about yourself. What do you like? What are your strengths, weaknesses? What are you studying in school? Why? Whatever. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? So those are the kind of things that you talk to the Career Development Center, they're going to tell you to be prepared to answer, because people like to ask that stuff. That's what we typically call an unstructured interview. You sort of sit there for 30 minutes or so. They ask you some different things. You talk. You BS a little bit. You have a good time or not. And then you're gone, and they rate you. Well, not surprisingly, that's not really that good. So, and remember, this is, in psychology, this is science. So we want evidence that this stuff works. And so what industrial psychologists might do is study the job interview. Study different ways to test people. Cognitive ability testing, personality testing, job knowledge testing, simulations, physical ability testing, certainly for police and fire. And what we want is what works. We want to know, do these tests work? Do they correlate with or predict job performance in the future? And so we use correlational data, my 341 students, that we'll talk a little more about today. And 4 of you, at least, anymore? Yes, at least 4 of you, 5 of you. And so we use that. We gather evidence. We do research to show that if we use this test or we interview people this way, does it work or not? So we're not out there guessing it. We're trying to use science to make decisions that help people. So testing. So you've done intelligence testing or cognitive ability testing. Anybody done that when you applied for a job? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did a lot of stuff like that in different police departments. I mean, I had in both departments. I did like 400 or 500 question tests.
Okay. Yeah.
It was crazy.
So So you may get something like with math questions and verbal questions. You may get some testing like that, cognitive ability tests. Turns out those are pretty effective for predicting performance in most jobs. People who do better on those kinds of tests tend to perform better in most jobs. So that's very effective. You may have personality testing. You may have physical ability testing, depending on the job. If it's police, fire, something like that, you definitely will. One of the things, I did another job analysis project for the Tampa Electric Company. So that was another interesting job, being around. I'm not blue collar at all. I know how to do nothing. And so here I am hanging out with guys who work in the substations. They build these substations where the electrical power gets transferred from the big power lines out to the communities. And they build them and they maintain them. And so I'm out there watching what they do. And so one of the things that we did to hire those people, they had to have the physical ability to climb up in these things and do work. They had to have the willingness to do that around very dangerous equipment. Transformers and circuit breakers are not the things you want to be messing around with. And so they have to be able to do that, willing to do that, and have many other characteristics. That's one of the things that we would put in part of the selection system. Personality testing is very popular. We talk about that a lot in my classes. So you've probably gotten to questions like that. How many of you worked in a retail company, retail job, sales, or they probably asked you a question about theft or stealing. So they're trying to predict who's likely to steal from the company. Not easy to do, but there are tests that try to measure that kind of tendency. So we study all of that. We talk about it. We study all that in selection. So that's what most people do who work in this area, is they're out helping companies design ways to hire people. And then they may have to train people to do them. Some things are much more complicated. You might do simulations where you might actually do role play. Anybody ever done that when you applied for a job? Did you have to role play anything?
Yeah.
You had to, Jared? Tell me briefly about that.
When I was interviewing to be a supervisor at UPS, they would ask about how would you deal with employees missing work or something like that, and you needed to be disciplined about it, and then you would have to go through and actually say what you would say.
So you would explain that you wouldn't actually be role playing with no person.
Oh, no,
but
you would
yes.
explain it and do it.
Yeah, okay. So you could do management jobs. It's very popular to have people role play scenarios. So they may have somebody trained to be like a subordinate who's having problems and it's difficult to work with. I got to be one of those, I worked for a consulting firm while I was in graduate school, and I got to role play that. So I was a real a-hole subordinate. It was really fun because I'm not that way in life, so I got to be that. You know, I got to act like that in role play scenarios. And you basically just set up this scenario, and they have 30 minutes to talk to you, and you, what do I do?
Move the mouse.
And then you see how they handle it. And you videotape them or you watch them and rate how effective they are. So there's a lot of ways that companies try to hire people, which you're going to run into when you apply for jobs. Now, one of the main things you have to do when you're trying to figure out how to hire people is to avoid discrimination, of course. And so one of the interesting things about this area, and I'm going to spend a couple weeks in my fall class, is studying discrimination laws, civil rights laws. And so in 1964, one of the big things that pushed this field of industrial psychology, got a couple notes here, was the passage in 1964 of the Civil Rights Act. And you've all heard of the Civil Rights Act? Please nod your head even if you haven't. Yes? Okay, make me proud. And so the Civil Rights Act banned discrimination in many areas, including education and employment. Anybody other than those who know this, what 5 characteristics did they ban discrimination on? You can't discriminate against people based on which 5 characteristics? Anybody want to guess?
Race, religion, sex, ethnicity. No, sorry.
Keep going. Color. And one more.
Country of origin?
Age.
Not initially.
Is it something weird?
Religion. Religion.
I'll have to say
Yes.
yes.
So initially it was race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So you're right. So and national origin. All right. Later to that, subsequent to that, age was added. Pregnancy status was added. What else? Disability Act, 1990-91. Sexual orientation is not a federal part of federal discrimination. Some states and local areas have added that. So there's a lot of characteristics that companies can't discriminate upon. Yes.
When do you think sexual orientation
already been added to the US Army.
I don't know if it is
And
on
federal.
federal things or not. But a lot of states
US military.
have, and cities some have. Okay, and so what does that mean? So that seems obvious, right? Okay, they can't discriminate. Anybody think companies were discriminating against people before that?
Yes.
Wouldn't do that, would they? Come on, no. Some still do, not as blatantly as before, but yeah, before that, actually, the companies could just systematically decide not to hire people. And of course, that's women in a lot of cases, ethnic minorities, older people, whatever. And so it was very blatant. And so this law made companies on the hook legally for their selection, promotion, pay, status, access to training programs. A lot of things can be subtly discriminatory in companies. And so a lot of companies have gotten in trouble for, say, for example, Publix grocery stores. Anybody ever heard of them?
Yep.
Some of this, they were big in Florida when I was down there in the 90s, and they have spanned up a little bit in Georgia, maybe South Carolina, some little areas. They got in a big suit in the early 90s based on sex and race discrimination in their upper management. They almost had almost all of their upper management were what kinds of people? What do you think? White males. Almost all. And so they, of course, thought, well, that's the people who are here, or whatever, and we're not doing anything wrong. Well, it turns out they were, of course, mentoring the white males up through the chain. They were giving them access to positions that led to promotions. They were allegedly, all these things, I guess, you always have to say that. There are always multiple sides to a story. And they were, of course, giving more training programs to certain people, and they were putting the females in positions that didn't lead to upper management. And so a lot of things are subtle like that a lot of times. And so it's sort of difficult to figure out what is discrimination and what isn't. Well, it's clear if you're just blatantly deciding not to hire people, that we're just not going to hire these kinds of people. That's clear discrimination, right? Firefighter, police jobs, a lot of both race and then, of course, sex discrimination as well in those issues. But sometimes it's much more subtle. So how about us say we have a firefighter physical ability test and no females pass. But females and males take the same test. Is that discrimination? See, it becomes complex. And we get into this in my class. If you treat people differently, that's clearly you're being discriminatory. But if you're treating them all the same, it may or it may not. It comes down to what kind of test you're using. Is that test really an accurate representation of the job? Are you fixing the test so that certain types of people don't pass? And so we talked about New York City, which got hit with some lawsuits when they finally were forced, I think in what, early 80s, I think, in that video, to allow women to apply. They didn't even allow women to apply to the fire department before that. And they finally were allowed them to apply, and they coincidentally decided to change their physical ability test and made it very upper body strength focused. Who did that benefit?
Males.
Males, yeah. And so then people argued, well, that's really not how you measure, that's not really the way it is in the job, and so it becomes a very complex kind of issue, but it's very interesting. And so we get into that, and we talk about that quite a bit here. You've also had training programs, so one of probably the second biggest thing that industrial psychologists do in the field, meaning out in a company or organization, is design training programs. And so that might be, you might be training supervisors how to interview people. Anybody had an interview when somebody asked you something clearly inappropriate? Well, maybe we talk about that before. Yes?
Oh, in the Army, I've been asked some clearly inappropriate things while talking about emotions or movements laterally or out. But that's just because we get so close.
But things in a job interview that might be based on characteristics you can't discriminate on. Things like, ladies, you planning on being pregnant soon? That would also be inappropriate.
She was practicing her inappropriate
But
ability.
the question would be what? So if you're going to be pregnant, I'm not going to hire you. That's clearly discriminatory, right? So you don't want to ask that. You can't ask people age because that might be used against someone. You can't ask people things that might be discriminatory against them. Not coincidentally, a lot of people don't know that. So you may be training supervisors how to interview people. and do it correctly and not ask things that might get you sued by afterwards, right? Or that are just inappropriate to start with. And so the training's a lot of things. So it's a lot better than just, when I worked in a company after college, it was just sort of go sit with Bill over here and learn the job. That was the training program. So you might want to be more sophisticated. You might design something a lot more sophisticated than that. And so people do a lot of that with the training programs out there. And then, of course, performance measurement. How many of you had your performance measured in your workplace? Ashley, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've taken your class before, and so I realized that my performance evaluations of this particular job were inappropriate because a supervisor would start off by saying, "I'm not allowed to give anyone over a 3." And so right there you know that it's not.
On what scale? 1 to 5?
Yeah, 1 to 5. And so it's
Okay.
it just makes you feel crummy and.
There are a lot of problems and landmines with this. So companies, we spend a good bit of time in class on this, because if you supervise anybody in the future, you're going to be doing this, whether you want to or not. In the company I worked for after college, they just came by and handed me these forms, and like, fill these out for your, they made me a supervisor for some crazy reason, right before I was getting ready to go to graduate school. So I'm like, I'm going to graduate school. I'm not going to be here long. Oh, we're going to make you supervisor anyway. So they're like, fill these forms out for the last year, and I've been a supervisor about a month. You see a problem with that? Absolutely. No training. I had no idea what I was doing. They were very basic 1 to 5 scales on very broad traits like, initiative and quality of work and whatever. I don't know. Work ethic or something like that. Very vague traits. And so there are a lot of problems with that. What happens is people feel like they're not being treated fairly. They feel like this is not fair. You didn't watch me all year. You came by one day, I made one mistake, and you saw me, and now you rate me down because of that. That's probably happened to some of you, right? And that's just not fair. And so people, all these things that have come up on the next screen get hurt and maximized in the wrong direction when you don't do this right. And so we talk about many ways that you can do this better by observing, making it very behavioral, making it much more systematic. And you give better feedback to people, you set goals and improve performance better, and they feel like they're being treated much more fairly. So there are a lot of potential issues with performance measurement. So these are the core industrial topics. The next one I do motivation in both classes, and actually it's probably my favorite topic, one of my favorites of any of them. So the organizational class, this is what we do, sort of starting here. We may or may not get to this one at the end, and we sort of go through these topics. So motivation, as I said, this class is a little bit more psychological theory and social psych based than the other class. And so organizational psychology, we study motivation. We study theories of what motivates people to work and how to maximize motivation in employees. What are some ways that companies might do that? What do you think?
Incentives.
So we typically divide it into a couple of categories, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. And so extrinsic is, what do you get out of the job? And so bonuses, commission pay, there are all kinds of things people might give you, recognition, Employee of the Month awards. Anybody ever gotten an Employee of the Month award? No one has?
Yeah.
You got an Employee of the Month award? Employee of the Year. We got a Manager of the Year award. Let's give them a hand. There's Domino's pizza there. Yes. And so a lot of ways to do that. Praise, recognition, stock options. There's all kinds of things you can do financially and recognition extrinsically. But it turns out there are things you can motivate people intrinsically. So intrinsic motivation is like wanting to do the job or wanting to do well in your classes because you like that. What we do on time?
12:50.
12:50? Yeah. Okay. And so intrinsic motivation is you want to work hard to succeed just because you enjoy it and you want it for yourself. It doesn't have to be anything from extrinsic. And it turns out there's some things in companies that companies can do to make jobs more motivating for people. Things like letting them do a variety of tasks. So most people are motivated by variety as opposed to doing one single thing. Things like autonomy, giving people autonomy. What does that mean? Somebody who wasn't in my class. Let's get some other people. What is autonomy? Yes?
Letting you work independently without too much.
Yeah, letting you decide how you do your work. So how many of you have autonomy in your jobs where you get to really decide sort of how you have professors, big autonomy, yes. Which is why most of us go into being professors, so we sort of do things the way we want to do it. How many of you have a job where you don't have autonomy, where you pretty much just laid out, this is what you have to do, this is how you do it, and you don't have much say with how you do it? So some of you may have jobs like that. Is that fun? You like that? Yeah.
Mine's
Okay.
kind of like both. Both.
I don't want to use one person to prove, see, that proves what I'm saying right
I
there.
mean, if you cut the sandwich this way, it's not, it has to be like you did. Like, it's just the little things that
Yes.
just are,
So most people, I'm sure there's, they're not Leah, obviously, but I'm sure there's someone out there who says, I don't want to have decisions. Just tell me what to do and leave me, and let me do it. So, but most people are motivated by autonomy. And then a big one is significance. So people have jobs that they see as being important to others or important to the organization. That motivates people. That motivates people quite a bit. So those are things that companies can do, or any organization can do, to try to make people be more motivated in their jobs. And it actually relates down here to teams. One of the reasons that organizations use work teams a lot of times is because that makes people accountable to each other. If you're a teammate and your coworker can't get their job done unless you do your job, that makes people motivated, because now that's significant. If I don't pull my end of the bargain, my whole team suffers. And so whether it's sports teams or work teams or any kind of team or group, people are accountable to each other, and that motivates most people. So that's one of the reasons why teams sort of came about. But other things we do, job satisfaction. So we study what makes people satisfied with their jobs. What might that be? What affects your job satisfaction, Leah, in general? What do you think?
I just don't want my boss.
Okay, your boss, your supervisor. What else?
Salary.
What's up?
Salary.
Pay, promotion,
Pay me minimum wage first.
benefits, of course. Co-workers. How many of you don't like anything but you love your co-workers? So I'm like, okay.
Yep.
And the work you do. So do you like what you do? So you might like what you do and tolerate a bad supervisor or co-workers because you like what you do. So those are things that we study with satisfaction. And of course, with motivation and satisfaction, we're interested in what do those things predict, or what do those things correlate with. And those things might correlate with things like counterproductive behavior, like absenteeism, not showing up for work, turnover, quitting your job and moving on to some other job. And if you're a good employee, we don't want that. We want good employees to stay. Showing up late for work, stealing things, sabotage, aggression, conflict. So all these things that are negative come about when people aren't motivated and they're not satisfied with their job and they don't feel like they've been treated fairly. And so all those things could come about from performance measurement earlier and anything else. There's the quality of the supervision, how you're paid. A lot of people, I like my job, I'm getting paid nothing, so I'm just not going to work hard. You know, it's not worth it. I'm not being treated fairly, so I'm going to start slacking off. So now their motivation's down. So that's bad for organizations. So we, of course, study all of that. We study leadership, what makes a good leader. A lot of great big theories about what makes people a good leader in any area of life, politics, sports, work. And so we study that. And there's characteristics that we study. There's situations. It's hopelessly complex, but it's very interesting as to what things, and a lot of things that you can learn from that study is how to be a good manager, a supervisor in the future. And so there are a lot of things that you can learn to do to do that, but people have different styles. So we talk about leadership styles and all that kind of stuff. Counterproductive behavior, we talked about a lot of examples of things that companies don't want people to do, and we try to think about how to prevent those. Maybe hire people who don't tend to do these things, treat them well, have good supervision, make them understand the policies and feel like they're being treated fairly. So all these things all go together, which is why I'm sort of doing this in my hand. And so that plays a role. Communication in the organization is another factor. And of course, we study job stress. So those of you, Dr. Khan is back here, this is sort of an overlap a little bit with more biological kind of things, because certainly stress has effects on the body. And so if you're in health psychology, neuropsych, that's sort of the one area that might overlap with work studies, sort of studying what the effect does job stress have on people. Study work-family conflict. There are people who study that, try to issues of how that plays a role. Does your work affect your family life, vice versa? How do we research that? What do you do about it? How do you handle stress? Does anybody have an organization that tries to help people manage stress in any way?
Yes. Everyone hear that? I guess it's like the number one killer of veterans is side. So we have to do a class like once or twice a fiscal year. It's like mandatory, like sit down and watch like special videos, you know, with like slow music and like they talk all about how people kill themselves and stuff like that, how to get through it and how to, you know, come out of the situation.
Okay. So this might be all the way from referrals to therapists to make that easily accessible. It might be helping people handle daily hassles. So a lot of big organizations have ways to help people get shopping done, or childcare on site, or elderly care, anything that makes people's lives more stressful, their employees more stressful, they may do that. This could be exercise programs, fitness programs, on-site stuff. So the bigger the organization, the more likely they are to be pretty progressive in trying to help employees handle stress.
My company has, you can have 6 free counseling sessions per year per topic. Like, so if you're addicted to something, you can have 6 free counseling sessions for that. If you're stressed out, you can have 6 free counseling sessions for that. It's like, it's free.
So you just have to come up with something different that's causing your stress, so you get 6 new sessions.
Right.
Okay. All right, so, what's that?
No, I work for human services.
I think Norman's does that too.
Okay. All right, I got about 5 more minutes where I have to run, teach class here. But let me just show you a little about how you become one of these people. So we have some, the business school has a major in human resources. They are putting people out in companies with a BA degree. I've had several students get out and work in human resources companies, departments and organizations with a BA degree or BS degree. But you're probably going to be doing lower level things. You're going to start at the bottom. You're going to be doing a lot of benefits and administrative kind of thing. And so to really do the kind of things that we do here and work in bigger organizations where you might be working in a selection unit where that's all you do, or a training unit and that's where you work on training programs or something like that, you're probably going to need some kind of advanced degree. But you can, like I said, get out and work. I've got some students do that in organizations, particularly if you do well in school, have internship experiences and that kind of things that we all try to encourage you guys to do. That's going to open up some doors. But the better way is to get some kind of graduate degree. So master's programs are going to be a couple of years. There's not one in Louisville. There's some in the general area. I've got a student down in Western Kentucky, and where is that? Bowling Green, right? Kentucky. Xavier in Cincinnati, Eastern Kentucky over south of Lexington, and IUPUI, Indianapolis. Those have good master's programs, all of them. And so that's a couple of years, and you can do very well with a master's degree in industrial psychology. You can get out and you can work at any kind of company. I've had ex-students from when I taught in graduate school who were in the class when I was in graduate school, and they went on, and they lived all over. They've worked out in San Francisco, Chicago, Charlotte, for either Lowe's or Home Depot, one of those two. Banking organizations down in Tampa Bay. So people, you can do really well and get out and do this kind of stuff with just a master's degree, which is pretty exciting. Or the higher degree, of course, would be the PhD. And so that gives you much more mobility, and the organizations I'll talk about briefly, and it gives you the opportunity to be a professor if that's what you'd like to do. To be a professor, you got to have a PhD. If you want to work out in the field, you can do it either way. Yes?
I've just heard that they've made a new addition to the liberal arts masters here, and it's called organizational leadership.
Yeah.
So is that
It's
worth
a
pursuing?
Master's in Liberal Studies program here, which is an interdisciplinary program that's going to be starting, it's called Organizational Leadership and Management or something like that. So my classes will be part of that, and then some classes in business schools, some classes in communications. So there are people that do similar stuff in all those areas. So that'll be cranking up, that'll be pretty exciting. So it'll give you an opportunity here locally to stay around. We have a student getting ready to start our PhD program right here, Brenda Ellis. You want to wave to everybody? So she will be a gopher or a golfer, University of Minnesota here starting with fall. So that's exciting. So PhD, you're talking about at least 4 or 5 years, full-time, real big commitment, and more difficult to get in the master's program. So you just got to come talk to me. You got to do some research if you're interested in this area, and you got to figure out what you can do to get in. Is it really going to get you where you want to be? There are different ways to fund this. You can get scholarships and assistantships and things to help. And so you got to think ahead. So you can't come up when you graduate and say, oh, okay, I think I'll do this. Maybe you can, maybe not. Better if you plan ahead and get the qualifications that you're going to need. So where do these people work? This is a little bit of dated data, but it's probably pretty similar. So obviously, if you're gonna be working in education, you're gonna need a PhD that way. But private sector jobs, you know, almost a lot of master's degree and PhDs do that. That's big companies, so that's in this area, that's who?
GE, Ford.
UPS back here, GE, Ford, Humana, Young Brands. Young Brands hires quite a few PhDs in industrial psychology. And smaller companies, so they can be small companies to bigger companies. Public sector is going to be government kind of organizations. You work for a local government, state, federal, police, fire jobs, those kinds of things. You'd be dealing with public sector organizations. Consulting firms are interesting. So a lot of people with master's degrees work at consulting firms and PhDs. So these are private companies who basically do projects for either government or other private companies. And so some of these are very big organizations that have a lot of the top people in the field. And so you pretty much are maybe you're going in, maybe the company hires this consulting firm to design their selection system. And you just come in and you do that. Had a buddy of mine who works for a small consulting firm up in Minneapolis, speaking of Minnesota. Down here a couple weeks ago working, I can't remember the name of the company, it's one of the can't remember the name, one of the companies over in West Louisville that does, remember, did we talk about what company?
Is it alcohol?
Was that?
Alcohol and
It was one of the, not energy, one of the chemical plants over there. And so he was working with his consulting firm. They designed a way to hire people. They needed very specific skills to work, some mechanical skills to work certain machinery. And so they were just figuring out how to hire people to do that. He had to come in and train the people there to administer these tests they had come up with. So that's selection and training sort of all mixed in one. So these consulting firms can be small groups. They can be huge organizations. And so that's interesting. You're going to do a lot of traveling. In here, if you're in consulting, you're going to be traveling around, working on projects, different companies. So it can be a pretty interesting way. You can make quite a bit of money doing that. Probably a little bit less security there than you would have maybe in a public sector or maybe a private sector company. So if you work in-house in a private sector, that means you work in, say, UPS. You are in-house there doing these kinds of things. If you're consulting, you're outside just doing it on different projects or different organizations. I think that's pretty much what I have here. I don't really want to talk about that. That's old stuff. What's up?
Money.
This is old date. I hate to even pull this out. I do it in my classes just because people always ask me to do this, but I don't even have any confidence that this data is even really correct.
All right, don't show it then.
It's because you're talking about very, very different kinds of jobs. So even in education, with PhD, you're talking about people in education, people out there all over the place. This was right at the start of when the economy started to go downhill too. And so it just depends. I hate to even put this stuff up here, so I will help you. Yes, Brenda.
The most recent PSYOP salary survey, I think, just finished, and the numbers are comparable.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. But still, you're talking about a wide range of opportunities. So even in education, teaching here at an undergraduate school versus being in Bloomington, that's a big, different kind of job. All right, so I've rambled on a little bit. So I teach 2 classes, industrial, organizational. Org in the summer, industrial in the fall. There are plenty of opportunities out there. If you're interested in the area, take your class. We'll try to get you out some internship or do some research to get you prepared for graduate school. Graduate schools are very interested in students having research experience regardless of what area you're going in. There are plenty of opportunities out there for that. And questions? Am I over my time? Almost. About on time. Questions?
I can talk to you later.
Yeah, sure. I am over in the Crestview basement, as most of you know, so Crestview owes you for it. If you want to come by and talk to me more, or take one of my classes, or on the websites. Anything else?
Do you want to give out your email address?
I can. I got some business cards you might really want. So it's T. Manson, T-M-A-N-S-O-N. I should have had that on here at home. At ius.edu. And if you really want to contact me, I have some business cards for you, which I will soon be able to get you. Yes.
And I'm gonna go ahead and pitch if you really wanna get involved in human resources, should you wanna share, I'm the president, come talk to me.
Yes. So the Society for HR Management Management has local organizations, and they have a student group, and they do a lot of similar kinds of things. They also have Friday morning events every month in this room, still, right? Usually,
More legal issues.
where they have a local law firm that does a lot of employment law. They come in and they speak. It tends to be really hands-on kind of stuff for people who are working in HR in companies, and so it's really very, very useful for those people who have to come to events like that to get certification. And so if you graduate and get into this late, we have an HR certification program in the business school that you can come back and get certified in human resources. Certificate program. We're developing some more inside. You've got the MLS program, so you've got opportunities here on campus to do a lot in these areas if you're interested. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Just to remind everybody, go ahead if you want extra credit, or if you're wanting to sign up for psychology club, just go ahead and sign up on the sign up sheet in the back.
So one thing that I was just remind is it just seems like you don't work for a company